Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Well, a gyre is a cone-shaped figure, and it's a sort of picture, a slinky of sorts that becomes wider and wider, a cone-shaped slinky, if you will. And if you think about falconry, it always depends on communication between the falcon and the falconer. And that communication for someone involved in falconry is everything. It's the connection between human being and bird. But turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. There's no connection there at all. The falcon breaks free. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Well, how many of us are daily plagued with the sense that there really is no center right now? There's this wild and whirling world. There's a decline in faiths of all sorts, whether it's a progressive and improving future or some spiritual faith at core. Faith is a difficult thing to muster these days, and a center, to experience it as something anchoring and real, has to be kind of a discipline of self-rooting in a set of beliefs, and the center cannot hold is a clear expression of a kind of spiritual unmooring and angst. So you have turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Well, anarchy, a spirit of kind of chaos, it's out there all the time. Things are just always crouched, ready to explode into chaos. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. And then you have this very dark image. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Well, you look at the context of composition in 1920, and the world was still reeling from the bloodshed of month after interminable month of just this general hemorrhaging of bloodshed and the hopes of a whole generation, and the psychical fragmentation and wounding from World War I was immense, and the idea of a blood-dimmed tide was very much a reality at the time. So turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Well, I love this image of the ceremony of innocence. We all have our sacraments of centering and anchoring and spiritual regeneration. And a lot of times they do go back to a kind of expression of innocence in the sense of the core of our being and our own sort of psychical union between childhood and adolescence and adulthood. That union of being becomes reawakened, and somehow there's some ceremony of innocence that is cleansing and healing and sustaining and provides some spiritual, even religious succor. But it's drowned, and it's drowned in that blood-dimmed tide that is both blood and is a loss of hope and a loss of faith and a loss of a center. So turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And of course, that's a cry and a pain that comes up any time that the world seems in disarray. I think of the beginning of Allen Ginsberg's 1956 epochal poem, Howl, where he talks about, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the streets looking for an angry fix, angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. And that was his beat version of some attempt to deal with the fact that our rational minds and analytic minds and creative minds can no longer deal with the chaos of existence and maintain a clear center and are somehow dispossessed from society. And that was an act of reclamation and reclaiming. It was an anthem of beat, but also it was a saying that the real now has become a kind of counterculture and insurgency insistent on art and insistent on spirit. And the best minds of our generation are really disaffected in that way. So that cry of the best among us being somehow destroyed is a common echo in life, but it's also a call to arms for those who can somehow transform grief or despair into art or beauty in some fashion. So the best minds of my eyes saw best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi. Spiritus Mundi is really the mythical tale of the tribe. It's the place internally, deep in our psyches, our collective unconscious, the spirit of the ages. Spiritus Mundi, the spirit of the world. Spiritus Mundi, somewhere in the sands of the desert, shaped with lion body and head of a man, and you have the invocation of a kind of sphinx. So out of all the stresses, somehow there's going to be a rebirth, a second coming, not necessarily the second coming of Christ, but some kind of rebirth and regeneration, even if it's dark. And again in history, you see these cycles of disillusion and fragmentation and despair, and out of that, some sort of rebirth. So it is very much a rebirth kind of poem. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Well, out of chaos, a rebirth, diagnosis of a period where the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of passionate intensity, and where the center does not hold. But I think that presents a reality every bit as important and real as the headlines that scream at us on a day-to-day basis, basically reflecting a world out of joint. Poetry is a homecoming and a comfort and an anchor and real.